The sun had just begun to sink behind the dusty hills of Amado village when Ada's feet touched the cracked earth she once called home. It had been 15 years since she fled this place, since the night her mother's body was found lifeless by the river, her food stall abandoned, her famous pots of pepper soup still simmering under the moonlight. The villagers mourned the loss of Mama Ifeoma, the woman whose meals had healed broken hearts and sick bodies alike. They said her food was magic. And for a long time, no one questioned it. Until that night. Ada, now a young woman hardened by the struggles of city life, had returned, not for nostalgia, but for survival. Life in Lagos had chewed her up and spit her out, leaving her with nothing but shattered dreams and debts that whispered threats in the dark. She needed a new beginning. And if her mother's legacy could be revived, perhaps she could carve a new path for herself. The village had changed little. The same crumbling houses, the same winding paths shadowed by ancient trees that seemed to whisper among themselves. The market square still buzzed, though the air was heavier, as if it carried invisible chains. Old women selling tomatoes nodded at her wearily, whispering behind their wrappers. Children stared wide-eyed, clinging to their mothers. To them, Ada was both a memory and a ghost. She set up her stall at the edge of the market, close to the very spot her mother once ruled. For days, business was slow. People passed by without a glance, preferring the safer, duller meals of other vendors. At night, Ada sat by the fire, staring into the flames, haunted by her mother's old recipe scribbled in a tattered book she found hidden under a loose floorboard. It was during one of these nights that Mama Chinya approached her. A woman as old as the village itself, with skin like dried cassava and eyes that missed nothing. "You can't feed their hunger with ordinary food," she said, voice as soft as the wind but heavy with meaning. "Your mother knew that. That was her secret." Ada listened as the old woman spoke of a forgotten art, how powerful cooks infused their meals with pieces of themselves, binding flavor with energy. Real energy. She spoke of a ritual, simple yet potent, that required a sacrifice both intimate and ancient. A part of oneself offered willingly into the pot. At first, Ada laughed it off. But laughter doesn't fill empty pockets. That night, desperate and trembling, she followed the instructions. She clipped a small piece of her own pubic hair, whispering the old words Mama Chinya taught her, and dropped it into the steaming broth. The next morning, the change was undeniable. Her first customers devoured her food with a hunger that bordered on madness. Word spread like wildfire. By noon, a long line stretched down the dusty road, and by evening, she had sold out twice. Ada wept tears of joy as she counted her earnings under the stars. But deep inside, a small, cold knot twisted in her stomach, a silent warning she chose to ignore. The price of success had only just begun to reveal itself. Ada's success blossomed overnight. Each morning, a fresh line of villagers snaked before her stall, eager for a taste of her magical dishes. They said her soups made their bones lighter, their hearts merrier. Some even claimed old wounds healed after just one meal. Coins flooded Ada's baskets, and for the first time in her life, she tasted the sweet, dangerous flavor of power. But as her fame grew, so did the whispers. Children began waking in the night, screaming of black hands pulling them into unseen pits. Young men who ate her food started falling sick, their bodies racked with fevers no herbalist could cure. A woman miscarried after eating Ada's pepper stew. Yet no one dared blame her openly. They loved the food too much. Their tongues craved it even as their bodies trembled with fear. One evening, as Ada closed her stall, she noticed a figure waiting by the shadows. It was Mama Chinya again. But this time, her wrinkled face was twisted, her eyes burning like dying coals. "You feed them greed," the old woman rasped. "But hunger never stays satisfied. It grows." Ada, flushed with success, sneered. "You taught me. You said this was the way. I taught you a beginning, Mama Chinya said, stepping closer. Not the end. The end is death, child. Always death. Shaken but unwilling to listen, Ada turned her back and stormed away. She had no use for fear anymore. The city had taught her that weakness was a luxury only the dead could afford. Days bled into weeks. The lines at her stall grew longer, but so did the tragedies. A respected elder collapsed after sipping her goat meat pepper soup. 2 children drowned mysteriously at the village stream, their mouths stained red as if from some strange fruit. People began to look at Ada not with admiration, but with a secret terror that glinted in their eyes. One night, Ada dreamed of her mother for the first time since returning. Mama Ifeoma stood at the river's edge, her once bright wrapper stained and heavy with mud. Her mouth moved silently, her eyes wide with sorrow. In her hands, she held a blackened pot, from which rose a thin, green mist. Ada reached out to her, but her mother turned and stepped into the river, vanishing beneath the dark waters. Ada woke with a start, her body drenched in cold sweat. The taste of ash clung to her tongue. The next morning, she found a dead rooster placed carefully on her stall. Its throat was slit, its blood drawn into strange symbols on the earth. A warning. Someone knew her secret. Fear gnawed at her as she packed up hurriedly, the once familiar faces of the villagers now twisted into masks of suspicion and disgust. The same mouths that praised her now muttered curses under their breath. She thought she could control it, the power, the hunger, but the thing she had invited into her food had taken a life of its own. And it was no longer asking for permission. It was demanding a blood price. And Ada knew it would soon come for her. The sky above Amado darkened earlier than usual, a thick, heavy blanket of clouds pressing down on the village. That evening, as Ada prepared her last pot of soup, the wind howled like a wounded animal, rattling the loose tin roof above her stall. She ladled the broth mechanically, her mind numb with fear. Every face she served seemed like a threat, every pair of eyes carried silent accusations. Yet she smiled, forcing herself to pretend that everything was normal. She had come too far to stop now. But deep inside, she knew the truth, the village itself had turned against her. Not because they wanted to, but because something in her food was twisting their souls, planting seeds of hatred and despair. And it was growing stronger by the day. As the market square emptied and shadows swallowed the stalls, Ada heard it, soft footsteps behind her. Turning, she found Mama Chinya once again, her ancient form barely standing against the fierce wind. "It is time," the old woman said, her voice cracking like dry leaves. "For what?" Ada croaked, though she already knew. "To finish what you started. Or be finished." Mama Chinya lifted a small clay bowl filled with dark, foul-smelling liquid. "Drink," she commanded. "Return what you took. Break the bond." Ada hesitated, memories flashing before her eyes, her mother's warm hands stirring pots, the laughter of villagers gathered around steaming bowls, the bitter tears she cried as a child begging for scraps in Lagos. Was it all worth it? Before she could decide, the ground beneath her feet trembled. A low rumble echoed from the river. Figures began to emerge from the mist, thin, gaunt forms, their faces twisted in agony. Ada recognized some of them, the elder who had collapsed, the children from the stream, even her own mother, standing among them, her eyes hollow. They moved toward her, silent, unstoppable. With trembling hands, Ada grabbed the bowl and swallowed the bitter contents. Fire burned down her throat, and she collapsed to the ground, writhing in agony. Her body convulsed as the spirits closed in. Through the blur of pain, Ada saw her mother kneel beside her. For a moment, the familiar scent of palm oil and wood smoke filled the air, and her mother's voice whispered, "True food feeds the soul, not the hunger. You forgot." Then everything went black. When the villagers found Ada the next morning, her stall was in ruins. Her body lay cold beside the broken pots, a peaceful smile on her face. In her hands was the old recipe book, its pages blank as if the knowledge had vanished with her. The villagers, once ensnared, felt the heavy fog lift from their minds. They mourned Ada quietly, burying her beside Mama Ifioma under the old baobab tree. Years later, the tale of Ada and her mother became a whispered warning across Amado. A reminder that true success is not built on shortcuts, nor power on the suffering of others. And that no matter how desperate the hunger, the soul's hunger must never be fed by darkness.